Hello and welcome to the results stream for round 7 of the 2026 SpaceChem tournament, Elements of Atropos. This level looks quite intimidating at first glance because it consists of 5 individual campaign levels from Atropos that crash down onto this planet right here. I think it's Sikuta, if I remember correctly. And all of them are scattered around, but luckily they are scattered around in such a way that they split off this region into 4 quadrants that can't really interfere with each other. So you can look at these as 4 individual problems. And the only problem with that is the metric, which is unique reactors based. That means you are supposed to not use different reactors, and different reactors means anything that is inside of the reactor has to be the same for reactors to be counted as the same. And only the output pipes are allowed to look different. So yeah, the metric is 7 times unique reactors plus Waldos. And yeah, we can talk about what that means when we have seen some solutions, I think. So you're just supposed to optimize both for not having distinct reactors if possible and for using only one Waldo if possible, and there is a trade-off between that potentially.
The metric, as stated, doesn't have much ranking power, so there are secondaries like cycles, symbols. I think it's mostly cycles.
Yeah, so the secondary or actually tertiary that matters here is cycles, and then symbols and grab drops are part of the metric, but they don't really matter. So when solutions are the same as far as unique reactors and Waldos are concerned, then cycles matter. And with that out of the way, I think we can have a look at the first solution, which is by Anning-May, and it is 2 reactors, minimum Waldos. So what that means is that there are 5 reactors here, and you need at least 5 reactors to solve this, because there are these 4 quadrants, and you need 1 reactor in each quadrant. And in the bottom quadrant, you have 3 outputs, which are all different from the inputs, so you need 2 reactors here. So yeah, 5 reactors is the minimum. And there are 2 unique reactors here, so 2 kinds of reactors, but all of them are single Waldo. So we can see.
So it's essentially a 2-reactor solution.
Yeah, and they are nicely color-coded, so the 3 to the left and to the top are all the same reactor, and the 2 in the bottom right are the same reactor. So with that out of the way, let's have a look at the first problem. And that is splitting ethane into ethylene and hydrogen. So how does the reactor do that? First of all, it just grabs the input from there, and then it goes over a lot of sensors. It checks for hydrogen there, which there's not, hydrogen there, which there's not, but hydrogen there. So there's 4 distinct cases here, and only the case of going to the right all the time is active for this input. And then it just goes on top of these 4 bonders, d-bonds, rebonds, using bonder priority to create the bonds correctly. And everything is nicely on top of the output zones already, so it can just output and start again.
Though in reality there are 3 cases.
I mean, there are 3 reactors, but kind of 4 cases. We'll see that. Now let's have a look at a different case here. So for this case, the top input is boron, aluminium, or silicon, and the bottom input is hydrogen. And the output right here is hydrochloric acid. So what do? Detect that it's no hydrogen anywhere. Well, yeah. And then the Waldo goes into a loop down here. Using into chlorine. So it uses the top input only once to detect the location of this reactor and then creates the output only from hydrogen. And it is using a flip-flop counter right here to create chlorine. So now it has reached 16, where chlorine is 17, so it creates hydrogens for the bond right here. Uses once to create the hydrochloric acid and outputs that. And then this just continues. And this bottom path here is completely isolated from the top path. So it doesn't really interfere. And that is one way of having multiple tasks being solved by one reactor. You just detect where the reactor is and then go into completely separate paths.
Anime exploits the fact that 18 has only 2-bit sets in its binary representation. So you can count to 2 to the 4th power and then just input twice.
Yeah, so this right here is 2 to the 4 equals 16 plus 2 hydrogens, and the 1 is at the very start and one is at the end. And then it runs through the 16 times. That is pretty straightforward.
I don't remember if we'll see this ever again.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see exactly this again.
Oh, right. Anime points out that the obvious way to do this is not possible because you hit helium and neon.
Yeah, so you can't have the bond initially and then just fuse into it because that breaks the bond at some point. Okay, so that is this one, and then there's one more use for this reactor, which is down here. And it has hydrogen as a single atom and hydrogen as a molecule. And those are the 2 remaining cases. So the hydrogen molecule gets detected right here with the first sensor. And then it just drops that and outputs it. And the single hydrogen gets detected here. And it also needs to form the hydrogen molecule. So it just drops it right there. And when the second one comes along, bond, drop, blind grab, and drop it over there. So yeah, you can get rid of this symbol here. No, you can't. Sorry. Ah, yeah, of course you can't.
It's for output shape normalization.
Yeah, this is the one output where the position actually matters, so sorry about that. I forgot that. Okay, so those are the red reactors, and then we have two blue reactors. So let's have a look at this bottom one. It actually gets the hydrogen that is passed through here. Sadly, that erases the annotation, but there will be two hydrogens here. And then, yeah, it inputs either phosphorus or silicon, and then it needs to make phosphine or silane out of that. And to do that, it inputs hydrogen, which seems pretty important. Then it puts it right here and uses bonder priority to bond it to this hydrogen. And then it runs around until it detects a hydrogen right there.
So this is, by the way, this is quite concise. This leads to quite the concise solution to the original puzzle that this one is based on. I think I've seen that in some records.
Yeah, Anime points out that this is from Tough Thought's symbol record for the original campaign puzzle, which does something similar here.
This is a good way to not care whether there are one or two hydrogen atoms in the input.
Okay. Yeah, now it actually detects already the second hydrogen here. I think I missed the first one. Then it detects that it is silicon because phosphine only needs 3 hydrogens, so it would just go straight across and drop that. But for silicon, it has a flip-flop here to count to 1 more hydrogen, which we can see on the next one. So the first one gets added, then the second one, then the third one, and then it already senses that, but it's silicon, so it goes over this flip-flop right here. And only outputs the second time it reaches this. And this path right here is for the other place where this reactor is used. So let us have a look at the other place, which is right here. And this works pretty similarly to the first place. So it grabs carbon from here, and now it goes through the same loop. Then it inputs, and it adds fluorine this time. And because of this flip-flop here, only inputting every second time it goes through here, it now also rotates twice before it bonds again. So automatically we have the fluorines on opposite sides of the carbon.
Maybe a bit late, but since this is the first solution that we are considering, it means that there have been no participation solutions that mostly based campaign solutions. Which is quite a pity because indirectly it means that the interest in the tournament has dropped a little in these later stages.
Yeah. And then whenever it detects that this carbon with 2 fluorines is done, then it goes over here, bonds it to this stack, and builds polytetrafluoroethylene out of that. And there's a blind grab to detect that it's done, and it moves it to the output zone, and that's that. Yeah, feels like a pretty natural way to solve this problem and this problem with mostly the same pathing, at least for the single Waldo solutions.
So who's the slowest here?
Who
is the slowest here? Which reactor?
Yeah. So we can run it for a bit, and we can see that this reactor right here is the slowest, only at 7 outputs, because it is creating all of this from individual hydrogens and running a long path back and forth for each hydrogen.
I think I saw 5 outputs somewhere.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so many outputs here. So this one is actually slower.
I wonder if you can speed up the blue reactor.
I mean, you could definitely do something like this to speed it up a little bit. Yeah.
Let's check the cycle count.
So it takes 36,083 cycles. And do you want to see how it is when it's sped up here?
I guess we can come back to this once we see the next solution.
Okay, yeah. So that was the first solution by Anningmay. So it contains only 5 Waldos and 2 unique reactors, which gives it a metric of essentially so a metric score of 19. And then the cycles act as a tiebreaker, and there are 36,000 cycles roughly. Okay, so let's move on to the next solution, which is by Team Kurokwe, which consists of Rukios and Davichi. And it's called Only 357. I'm not sure what that is referring to. And it is also color-coded, so these 3 reactors are the same, and those 2 reactors are the same. Okay, let's have a look at the first one again. So this has a lot of sensors here, and it is sensing the carbon, which does not actually activate any sense commands. And then it drops it there, and it uses the bonders over here, which is a little bit less convenient than having the bonders over the output zones, because now both halves need to get moved, but it's still manageable. And there the loop repeats. Actually, there is a carbon sensor down here, although when that doesn't activate, the Waldo just gets stuck, so that might as well be an arrow.
I may have written about that already. Oh no, I only wrote that in the tournament chat. Sorry. So this solution shows clear signs of being in an finished, essentially one reactor solution. So imagine if that blue one was, if you had a sink on J8 and the red Waldo waiting on the sink at the start.
Yeah, Brokius also said something about trying to make a essentially one Waldo solution, but not having the time for it and just
Essentially one reactor, you mean?
Yeah. What did I say? Yes.
Essentially one Waldo.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just thinking in one Waldo. Sorry. So he didn't have much time and just submitted this. So
I suppose he ran out of time.
And the thing that makes it harder to combine these two distinct reactors with one Waldo each into one is like essentially one reactor with two Waldos is of course the placement of the features, so the bonders and the sensor and the fusion glyph. Okay, so that was the first use of this reactor. Second use is right here to turn hydrogen into hydrogen. So it uses the hydrogen sensor right here to detect that there's hydrogen. And then a second hydrogen sensor there to detect if it's the atom or the molecule. The molecule just moves straight over there and it drops it in this location down there. And the single atom gets placed right there, where the next one gets bonded, and then there's a blind grab again, and it gets placed in the same location. Also, there is this input here to already have a hydrogen and go to the right rather than up to split this path again. And then it also needs to not hit this import command, so there's another hydrogen sensor right there to go to the right and not hit the import command. Okay, and the third use of the reactor is over here, where it is used to create the polytetrafluoroethylene. And it is doing this. Let's start from the beginning again. So it inputs and then it detects the fluorine. It also inputs up there. Now it takes this top path and inputs another fluorine, but that's not hydrogen, so now it moves up, bonding over there, and dropping that on the bonder again. So it grabs the second fluorine, and it's building over here.
By the way, we had the G4 flip-flop primed at some point in the past, so we don't accidentally input another carbon.
So yeah, every second time it grabs a fluorine, it also inputs another carbon. And yeah, then it just bonds up here, has the blind grab drop to move it into the output zone when it's done.
There's also quite a bit of insight on how 10 spaces is just enough to fit this polymerization logic.
Okay, now let's have a look at the other two reactors, which are essentially the same. So here it is creating hydrochloric acid from hydrogen. How does that work? It moves onto the sensor, detecting that it is hydrogen, and then goes up there. And just
I
keeps...
don't remember, did the original puzzle have another input that's not used here?
Yeah, there is another input right there. The boron...
Oh, I guess...
aluminium silicon input.
Oh, yeah, right. In the original puzzle, you were given these 3 random inputs, and in a cycle solution, it's beneficial to use them because they get you more atomic mass per input. But in the original puzzle, hydrogen is the... I think hydrogen is the bottom one. And the random one is at the top. So, surprisingly, or rather unsurprisingly, it turns out that in a simple solution, it makes no sense to use the top input. And so the current record simply fuses everything from hydrogen, as this solution does.
So this one actually has a 17 count, I think. It seems to count to chlorine. And then it goes all the way around and bonds another hydrogen to it, detecting that with the lower sense command and then dropping it over there.
Also, this stands out to me as the slowest reactor here, or most likely the slowest.
Okay, so what does it do in the other case? When there's phosphorus and silicon here and hydrogens down there, so it's bonding first on the left side where that doesn't work because the hydrogens are still bonded, and then on the right side after debonding, so it grabs the right hydrogen first, and then there's this flip-flop to input only when both are used up. And it reuses the same sensor that was used to detect the hydrochloric acid when that was done, to detect when there are 3 hydrogens bonded to this atom.
So this is another way to not care about how many hydrogens you get. Oh no, this is not. Here you must have 2. Never mind.
So then grabs this in a different place to move the silicon onto the sensor again. And yeah, it senses silicon, so it doesn't immediately output, but wants to attach another hydrogen. So there's this flip-flop right here to count to one more. Grab the silicon again.
Wait, Anime does this, but it's merged with the polymer. Why does it work? Why does Anime not care?
What do you mean? Because for
how does Anime manage to not care whether there is one or two where there is one or two atoms in the input?
for the polymer, you need the two things to be attached at opposite sides, so it just runs through the loop twice, rotating twice, and then inputs a new thing.
All right. Yeah, then I have no more questions.
Yeah, okay, and then the second time it goes here, it just drops it in the output zone and then eventually hits an output command somewhere. And there's the first phosphorus, so it bonds 3 hydrogens to it, detects the third hydrogen, now puts the phosphorus onto the sensor, but doesn't send silicon, so it goes straight down and outputs that. So that is how this works. Let's identify the slowest output. That seems to be this one, the hydrochloric acid one. By far the slowest.
But I think Anime does the fusion as well, so it's likely that he's not much slower than this.
So yeah, this is 35,000 cycles, actually 35,500 compared to 36,000 before. Very close.
With that in mind, let's check if some loop shortening would have helped Anime.
So that was down here, right? Just imagine doing that on the others as well. That's just fair, I can do that too. So not quite, but we're getting there.
Think you don't even have to go to the J file.
That was not actually the correct reactor to do that to. Was it? Okay, no, that does not work. Why does that not work?
It hits output. It hits output at I6. The way to fix that is to never go to the J file from the bottom path.
Okay, that's it. That is how you make Enigma's solution faster than Quirocquis.
Here's why you should always care about torturies.
I mean, I'm sure we could also find something here, considering that this is more of a participation solve than really optimized. So yeah, let's undo these changes and have it back to the original score. And have a look at the host solution, which is a single Waldo solution, of course. And it also scores 19, so it has 5 reactors, 2 essentially different kinds. And yeah, because of my single Waldo things, these are sadly not color-coded, but you can still see that the top left 3 are the same and the bottom right are the same, like in Anime's solution. And yeah.
Rest in peace, YouTube viewers.
What happened to YouTube?
I mean, it had terrible compression last time, but maybe it improved.
Okay. So this first reactor.
Yeah, GGGoal says just use that magic color swap command.
Yeah, but then it doesn't follow my self-imposed single Waldo rules of always using the red Waldo. Are we willing to live with that? I think we can also look at it like this. So this one actually doesn't sense the difference between hair, swap the colors, makes everyone happy.
No, the wrong reactor.
What? No, what? What is wrong about this?
Oh, never mind. I thought you swapped it in the first reactor.
So back to the solution. This one actually just treats those 2 cases, I think. No, those 2 cases? Yeah, I think those 2 cases the same. We'll see which 2 cases. So it doesn't even sense the difference and just does some blind grab drop things. So here it uses Sponder priority again to split the 2 halves apart, or the hydrogen and the ethylene, and immediately outputs the hydrogen, and then brings that one up there, and goes through a bit more looping stuff for the other possible things to handle here. And the other thing that it handles is down here, with the same path. So it grabs the hydrogen, either atom or molecule, and places it here. Then nothing really happens. It debonds and grabs the top hydrogen if it is present, and goes through the top loop right here with the bond drop and blind grab. And then it grabs the next one and goes again with a bond drop blind grab to build hydrogen again.
I have no idea how you managed to describe your own solution as if you were seeing it for the first time.
Yeah, I'm good at that. Okay, so that's hydrogen and the other thing. And then there is a third case, which is creating the hydrochloric acid. And for that, I'm actually using both inputs here. Well, kind of. Just to detect the silicon, drop it there and never touch it again, and then create everything from the bottom input.
No, bad boy, don't grab it.
So here I'm actually handling 2 hydrogens at a time. So the first one just sits there. And then the next one gets bonded to it, fusing whatever is there into it. This way, this is always an odd-numbered atom, so there is a bond. It can never be a noble gas. And if it is not chlorine, then it gets fused.
Well, in a way, this is helpful because you can now sense not only from the child that the sensor is on.
And then when the chlorine gets detected, it just gets dropped over here. And that is the red Waldo reactor. And now we have a blue Waldo reactor, which does something very similar to Enningmay's solution. So it also first uses the right hydrogen, but it actually doesn't loop back. It just has a flip-flop to decide which one to grab. Then
Yeah, it's faster as well.
the trickiest part was actually just having enough space around the sensor to handle all the 4 different cases that I need to handle here. So it checks for fluorine first, and then it checks for hydrogen, which there's none yet, so it continues adding hydrogens. And now that there is hydrogen, it goes to the right, checks if this is phosphorus, which it is not, so it continues going right, and then there's a flip-flop to attach one more hydrogen. So it does that, detects the hydrogen again, and outputs at the bottom.
You all know the correct way to solve that puzzle.
Okay, when will we get the phosphorus? Here it is. And when the third hydrogen arrives eventually, then it detects that, detects the phosphorus, goes up here and drops it over there. And for the final reactor, basically does the same thing. First time it goes through here, it doesn't bond anything, and then the second time it bonds to this fluorine, rotates once, and then it rotates a second time and bonds again, detects the second fluorine with this sensor, and here it starts building the polymer.
I wonder if it would have helped to. I mean, oh, never mind. It's not the slowest reactor, most likely.
So the slowest reactor
Oh, is it? It is.
is at 52, this one.
Yeah, it is the slowest reactor. Why is that the slowest?
Actually, I think this one is input rate limited from this one. Yeah, actually creating the hydrogen molecule is the slowest, and this one waits on inputs quite a bit.
Oh yeah, because it's fused with the ethylene case.
Yeah. Yeah, this is also not really all that cycles optimized. When I made the solution, I just checked the feasibility of the main metric and not really, like, we didn't even know what the tiebreaker would be. But this is at least the lowest symbol solution we have. So if the tiebreaker had been symbols, this would have the best solution of its kind. So yeah, 25,000 cycles, 255 symbols, which is the lowest of all the solutions we have. Spoiler, I guess. Now the next solution is by Team Absolute Zero, which consists of Rexkix, Gigigol, and Zarkile. And it's called Almost Serious Solve version 3.5. This one...
Here's why Team Absolute Zero aren't the best on a planet's absolute zero temperature.
We have...
I think it was. I don't remember if it was mentioned in the lore for the game that you get in those little. In those chunks in between levels.
But if this is really absolute zero, like, how can you have like liquid things in it?
I don't remember what the ocean contents here are. Was it liquid nitrogen? Oh no, it wasn't. It was water. So never mind.
So yeah, this is once again a two distinct reactor solution with single Waldo within each reactor. And these three reactors are the same, and the top and bottom one are the same, which is something we haven't seen before. And it's also rather symbol heavy compared to the ones we've seen before. This one handles the ethylene. How does it do that? It already debonds over there, then brings the hydrogen over and brings the ethylene over. And that just repeats. Meanwhile, it uses these carbon sensors right here to go back up. So it senses carbon right there.
So it's a way to conserve symbol space.
The other use of this reactor is all the way down here. So what does it do here? It inputs one alpha. And now it does not detect carbon here, so now it goes onto a different path. Where it bonds to 2 hydrogens at a time.
So you would think that this task is better merged with the polymer one because of the similarity that you can exploit with attaching one fluorine atom then rotating. But apparently not. This solution is better than the other solutions with the other 19 solutions.
Yeah, and doesn't even attach the hydrogens one by one, but pairwise, which is a little bit odd considering that phosphine needs 3 of them, but we'll see how that gets handled. Can maybe do this for now. Where does it actually have? There's the phosphorus. So it detects the phosphorus and goes to the left over a bunch of flip-flops and returns onto the path. And then it attaches 2 more hydrogens. It takes the phosphorus again and detaches 1 hydrogen over here. And then outputs the phosphine and brings the hydrogen that it detached to the top. It attaches 2 more hydrogens. And now this flip-flop activates. And it just goes to the top and attaches the last hydrogen like that.
This got me wondering, what's the best cycle solution to this puzzle?
So
I haven't seen that at all.
yeah, so just to this puzzle on its own, like the campaign puzzle.
Yeah. So clearly it's faster if you input 2 hydrogens at once. I mean, process 2 hydrogens at once. I wonder what you should do in order to go faster.
Yeah, so Big Mango Head says that it's using a lot of precog in the cycles solution for this.
Yeah, I can see why it's not useful to build a complete solution. But surely there's a category where only complete solutions are allowed.
I'm not sure anyone actually keeps track of those. Meanwhile, we can have a look at the other reactor right here for the case of creating the hydrogen molecule. So it inputs the top input, which is either 1 or 2 hydrogens, and then it goes over a lot of hydrogen sensors. And it just drops this one to the left. Just so that there is a hydrogen on a sensor, and then it goes around it. And it drops this one just by precork, I think. Or no, actually it did this blind drop to grab over here to check that it is a full molecule, and drops that in this place where the next reactor needs it. And when it gets a single atom, then that just sits on the grab drop until the Waldo comes around the second time, where it gets placed over there. And then when the second hydrogen joins, they bond together. It drop grabs this one to check if it's complete and then brings it to the output zone.
So this is the second time we see a door stopper technique where one input molecule is used simply to switch to the correct circuit inside the reactor.
And when it arrives here with a single hydrogen, then this bond happens. If it's a double hydrogen, then it does not happen because this is already bonded. So that is how this one works.
Yeah, it helps that we can only drop on E7, so we can never carry a single hydrogen into the output.
And GGGol points out that this is the slowest part of their solution. Okay, we'll see about that. There are two other uses. So one is up here and the top input just gets ignored again. And it's just using the hydrogen to create hydrochloric acid. So here
I keep switching to my SpaceChem instance because Discord preview shows some SpaceChem and my SpaceChem instance shows some SpaceChem in preview.
Okay. It once again drops the first input over here because that contains hydrogen, but this is not a full molecule, so it doesn't sit on the sensor. And now it goes into a different path where it grabs this and drops it. And then it goes over all these inputs and fuses to create chlorine like that, which you can only do if you have your fusion glyph on the input. But then it's pretty fast to do this. So that is chlorine. And that gets grabbed. One more input. Gets grabbed right there. So every second time it goes through here, it inputs one more hydrogen and bonds and drops. And every fourth time it goes through this entire loop to turn this hydrogen into chlorine.
We haven't seen any use of the random inputs here so far, have we?
We have not.
Oh, I also wonder what the Cycle's solution to this puzzle in the original game looked like.
So yeah, this and this and this is what is used to create the hydrochloric acid. Then down here, what was it again? Yeah, all of this pathing down here. And then for the last case of creating the polymer, it goes all the way down there because there's no hydrogen anywhere. Bonds to the fluorine, bonds to it again on the other side. and then goes up with a blind grab drop to move it to the output zone. So there are 3 distinct paths in here that don't really share anything. Okay, let's have a look at which is the slowest output. And yeah, it's those two. And this reactor is limited by the input it's getting from this reactor over here. So all of these long loops to move a little bit of hydrogen around are the slowest aspect of the solution.
Yeah, it seems unfortunate that hydrogen is output omega. Because we could have had that same loop in output T.
Hmm.
Which surely leads to a faster solution.
Yeah, the bond up position is also like important for the different usages.
No, I mean this is a 2-puzzle reactor, not a 3-puzzle reactor.
Now this is the 3-puzzle reactor. Right.
Why is it?
1, 2, 3.
Oh yeah, I see it. That was the polymer. Never mind.
Okay, so yeah, let's run this to completion. And it's only taking 17,000 cycles, so it is significantly faster than the previous solution, which wasn't even scoring anyway. And compared to the last scoring solution, it is about twice as fast. Now we can move on to the next place, which is
Last scoring solution with the recent additions.
What do you mean?
I mean, you scroll back to Kuokua.
Yeah. So the next solution is by counterpoint default solution. And this right here is the first essentially one reactor solution. And it has quite a few symbols because every reactor now has 2 walls inside of it. And yeah, by doing this, the metric score goes down from 19 to 17, plus or minus a little bit of tie breaking.
Yeah, so as I said, the two most significant parts of the metric don't have much ranking power in this puzzle.
So this is a little bit more complicated. The blue waldo is just sitting on a sink and not really doing anything. Meanwhile, red is inputting, so Let's just deactivate blue until red hits a sink. Also notice that the sensor here is on the bottom input.
No, blue is not the active voltage here.
Yeah, so I meant I'm gonna deactivate blue in all the reactors until somewhere it becomes active.
Oh, I see.
So carbon gets sensed, and there's a carbon sensor or sense command here. So it goes all the way around and grabs the ethane down there. And then it senses the hydrogen and it goes back up over this prime flip-flop, okay. And it brings it onto this bonder square, which is really convenient to split the ethane into ethylene and hydrogen. So it goes over bond minus and bond plus, and then moves the ethylene down there.
Oh, this might sound obvious, but there are mostly two approaches to this kind of puzzle, and solving with essentially one reactor. As you can see, the previous solutions have been single voltage solutions for reactor. So it's enticing to simply use different voltages for the different kinds of reactor that you want to get, and then switch between them and the start. So here you can see that the red voltage has a stop at F1, supposedly to switch to the blue voltage. A stop at J8 and also a stop at F8. So it's enticing to look at this puzzle this way. You have to detect which case you are in at the start in this, and then switch to the appropriate solution with the appropriate folder. But this is not always sufficient for a fast solution. So you could maybe try a bit harder and make a solution where both voltages are sometimes meaningful in a given reactor.
Okay, so let's go over here now. So red inputs at the bottom again, and the bottom this time is this boron, aluminium, and silicon input, while the top is hydrogen. So there's silicon right here, which does not get sensed by anything. It grabs this and drops it over there. And then it continues on this loop, grabs the next input and drops it over there. And then it inputs the third atom and hits a sink. So now the blue waldo actually does something. In this case, it is aluminium right here. So the red waldo will detect this over here and just run into the wall. And only the blue waldo will do things from here on out. It does detect the aluminium. Bonds together the hydrogens. Places that over there and fuses. And then it continues bringing two hydrogens that are bonded together, fusing and dropping them there. And then there is this flip-flop counter to count when the hydrochloric acid is done, and when it is not done, it hits fuse and brings the atom over there again.
Amazingly, despite being a solution that does use the random, the does input the random input, it doesn't use it.
So that's 12, 14, 16, and the next one will then be hydrochloric acid right here. The flip-flops are all in such a state that it goes down here and it outputs. Then it detects aluminium again and starts all over creating new hydrochloric acid.
So the random inputs really are door stoppers.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what you would call them. I mean, I don't know the SpaceChem terminology for this. I suspect that there is none.
I'm not familiar. Maybe I would call them like tokens or something. Why does this reactor not trigger on the first silicon instead of the third input, which is aluminium, Rex Kicks ask, and we will see that shortly, I think in this reactor down there. So just keep that question in mind until we get there. So now we come to this reactor, which creates the hydrogen molecule. It immediately detects hydrogen there and goes into spamming the sink. And then blue takes over. It does not detect any of these. Instead, it detects the hydrogen and grabs it. So this is a blind grab because it doesn't actually know which kind of hydrogen it is. And Anime wants to speak.
Yeah, sure.
No? How do we...
I have invited you.
Okay, I don't know.
Misclick, perhaps.
So yeah, the hydrogen molecule just gets blindly grabbed over there and brought to the output zone. And then the individual hydrogens get handled up there. We can see that when they arrive. So here's the first one. It does not get grabbed, obviously, but then it gets grabbed going to the left. And there's once again a bond drop grab over there to create a hydrogen molecule out of that. Like this. And then it also gets rotated around and dropped over there. Goes over the sink, but that is no problem because red is sitting on a sink. Okay, so that is how the hydrogen gets handled. Now we get to this reactor. And red once again starts out by inputting, and it is again silicon, and that answers the question why it did not look at the first input at the top here, because that is silicon, and this is also silicon, and it can't tell those two apart. So instead it stores this over there, and it stores the second, which is also silicon in both of those cases. And then the third input is silicon down here, but it is aluminium up there. So only at that point can it know in which location it is. That is maybe a bit unfortunate with the RNG that the first inputs in both of them are silicon, but that's what happens sometimes. And yeah, then why do I keep missing the time when something happens?
No, I have a small life story about that. So when I was in high school, I participated in a competition called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. So you have a robot. You program a robot that is, as the legend says, is dropped in an unknown space in a warehouse. And so it has to find its way out while also. So it has to find its way out, and the map of the warehouse is known, but it doesn't know where it is in the warehouse. So the task is to basically build an algorithm that's in the shortest real time. I mean, by moving the robots, examining sensor readings, lets it understand where it is in the warehouse and then plan the correct route. So you have typically it's easy because different parts of the building don't look the same, but sometimes you could be like in section 9 or section 10, and section 9 and section 10 don't differ in any way. So you have to sometimes you have to go quite far in order to tell them apart from each other. So this is all because counterpoint has to go up to the author's input to tell things apart. That's what prompted me. Story time over.
So yeah, at this point, the red Waldo detects that it is not aluminium, but instead it has to be silicon. And it keeps going up while the blue Waldo is on its path. But it is detecting the silicon and stopping right there, so the blue Waldo does not actually do anything here. And it is the red Waldo that keeps going. It grabs the silicon. And brings it over there. And then it inputs hydrogen, bonds it to the silicon, and rotates this around. So this bounce back here is just so that it always grabs the correct thing, because right now it is grabbing the hydrogen, but it should be grabbing the silicon instead. So it's doing a drop grab here, but when it is already grabbing the correct thing, and that is only like one atom wide, then that would be sitting on the grab drop, so it needs to go back and pick that up. Yeah, and it keeps going until it detects the hydrogen down there, which is not yet there. And now it detects the hydrogen, so it knows that all 4 hydrogens are there. And it actually goes through the same loop that it went through for the ethylene, or whatever it's called, ethane, something like that. And then drops its silane down there. Now for phosphorus, it is First of all, doing the same thing, doing the bounce back to pick up the phosphorus sitting on a grab drop, attaching hydrogens, but then it senses the phosphorus and goes to the right here.
Furious timing flip-flop. At F6.
Yeah. But I'm not really sure what that is even doing. Like, why doesn't it just go straight up? Seems to just be wasting time here for some reason. Anyway, when it hits this phosphorus sensor here, it goes to the right, and then it detects the hydrogen there, so that gets activated when the third hydrogen is there, and it goes up, dropping right there. Then it goes through the same loop, but now there's nothing to grab over here, so it stays in the upper output zone. Yeah, I don't really see the point of this flip-flop and the arrow. Couldn't that just be an arrow going up?
Maybe it's meaningful in the other reactors.
Seems only meaningful for timing between the two Waldos. We'll see. Okay, so the final reactor right here has carbon at the top, fluorine at the bottom. It just grabs this one and places it over there. And grabs the second one, places it over there. And then the third one, it runs into a wall and hands over to blue. So it's just placing those there because it needs to tell apart the other two places. Here it could just look at the first one, but it needs to do the same thing everywhere, so it looks at the third input instead.
Yeah, I just checked in my local instance, and it really is furious.
Okay. So here it attaches both fluorines to the carbon, and then goes to the right and uses this 2x2 of bonders to build the polymer.
Sorry, bad English of me. Extraneous.
So essentially, these three reactors are a blue Waldo solution, and these two are a red Waldo solution. And then there's some overhead in the beginning to determine which one it is. And of course, the feature placement has to be the same in all of the reactors, which makes this more difficult than having purely single Waldo and two different reactors, and also why it makes sense for this to score better.
I think the fusion laser placement is rather weak here.
Yeah. So this output is the slowest one because it is carrying around pretty much individual hydrogens. Well, it's doing a little bit of a shorter path for each second one.
Yeah, it's also because of the weak fusion laser placement.
Yeah. So yeah, this takes 33,000 cycles. And I believe you should be able to speed it up at least a little bit by doing this. I'm pretty sure that should also work for the other reactors. And then it would be 31,000 cycles. Actually, leaving the selection makes sense. So yeah, that is counterpoint solution.
Oh, I wonder what's the fastest way to copy and paste reactors. I've playtested this puzzle a little bit and I found it's not quite convenient.
I mean, basically you need to like reset the pipes and then control drag the reactors around and place the pipes again.
Yeah, the piping situation is a bit inconvenient.
Maybe we need a right-click copy entire reactor option right here. If this metric turns out to return in the future. Or you can also like export the solution and move things around in there. But I'm not sure that is faster than dragging some pipes around again. So yeah, that was counterpoint solution with 31,000 cycles. And now we can move on to the third place, which is Zabocar with one-stop shop. This solution also is essentially one reactor, of course, and it uses 2 wallows in each reactor. So 10 in total. Right here, it starts off with red on a sink and blue hits input. The sensor is at the top input here. And then blue hits the sink, so both wallows run over some sense commands now. Red detects the carbon, so it moves to the left again. Blue also detects the carbon and grabs the input. And then it detects hydrogen and moves to the right, while red just sits there, so let's turn off red for now. Blue regrabs the molecule and then drops it over this square of bonders. Redoes the bonds and outputs, and the bonders are in such a convenient location that it can immediately output those, or like whenever it feels like outputting them. And then blue continues and red doesn't really do anything. That is how the first case is handled. So pretty simple loop for blue, and red isn't doing anything. Next is to wait a little bit until the silicon arrives. Blue detects the silicon and red also detects the silicon, and then red sits on a lot of sinks. While blue goes down here, inputs the bottom input, and then it starts using while red counts the things. So this is definitely a shorter fusion loop than before. And it is using the help of the other Waldo to count the iterations. Because then red just grabs the chlorine out of the way, brings it onto the bonders, and grabs the next hydrogen, bonds it onto the output zone, hits output, and then it goes back to the sinks. So this is actually some cooperation between the Waldos.
Yeah, it's an easy way to have one model have the other because it's remote for the most part.
For the next reactor, top input has the hydrogens, so red immediately detects that and goes back to its sink. Blue grabs, no, actually blue goes over here and detects the hydrogen and grabs this. Brings it over here, debonds and rebonds, and then drops over there. Why does it do that? We will see shortly. And it grabs again, debonds, rebonds, and this doesn't really do anything for the hydrogen molecule. Just keeps it intact and then drops it over there. So the next one is handled the same way. And then when it gets a single hydrogen, this one gets dropped over there. But of course, the blind grab here can never grab anything because there's only one atom sitting on a drop. So that just remains there. When another single hydrogen comes, then that bonds together and drops it over there. And now the most interesting thing, what happens when there's already a single hydrogen and two more come along? Then it gets debonded, bonded. Bonder priority makes sure that these bond before those. That gets dropped over there, and this one gets dropped over there. So this little loop can handle single and double hydrogens, and it doesn't really need a sensor to distinguish between anything. Yeah, Saboka says that the sensor is used up for other purposes, so this normalization has to be done without any sensor.
I think, I'm not sure, this is a famous, this is someone's famous historical solution for the campaign puzzle.
I have no idea. I'm not the right person to ask about history on campaign puzzles. Okay. Then what is the next reactor doing with these hydrogens? It is waiting for them to arrive.
Except, well, we had the spiral, but the so the campaign puzzle only gives you two bonders, but you can still. Oh, does it? Oh, never mind. It gives you four. I just checked. So when you first see this puzzling campaign, you get mainly two ideas. The first one is to simply separate the single hydrogen and proceed normally. And the second is to actually accept both single hydrogen and double hydrogen input. So the way you can do that is by building a spiral, where you just take from the... You arrange four bonds in a square and you make a hydrogen spiral that always has that whenever it has at least two hydrogens, the last two are bonded together, so you can take them. So Atropos does something similar here.
Okay, so when the hydrogen arrives here, it is not on top of the sensor, so both Waldos just move along. And the blue Waldo actually starts hammering bond plus, so it's not doing nothing, it's actually doing something right here. But I'm still gonna make that invisible. Just imagine bond plus being hit every cycle. Then it uses bonder priority, so debonds and rebonds right here to create this bond between the silicon and the hydrogen. And it can't create a second bond. And Sabok also says that this bond hammer is a last minute change. Until yesterday's the colors were swapped, and yeah, then that didn't really work out, I think. Then this hydrogen gets bonded down there. There is a sensor up there to detect when there's a third hydrogen. So it detects the third hydrogen. Now it checks if it is phosphorus. It is not phosphorus, it is silicon instead. So it goes over here, rotates, drops over there, and goes over this flip-flop, which adds one more hydrogen. And then it goes... actually, no, this flip-flop does something else. Yeah, this is the flip-flop just for inputting hydrogen and grabbing it. So actually this hydrogen sensor right here detects the fourth hydrogen and then it moves to the output zone. Okay, here's the phosphorus. Two hydrogens get attached. And then when the third hydrogen gets attached, it detects that and it detects the phosphorus, so it goes to the left and eventually drops it over here and outputs. So that is this reactor, and then there is one last reactor over here. Where the carbon is at the top and fluorine at the bottom. So red detects the carbon and bounces back. Red doesn't really do anything here. And then blue attaches both fluorines just with a little loop like that. And conveniently already starts building the polymer down here. So these bonders here are pretty convenient for doing both of these things at the same time. And then there's a blind grab and a drop. So that is
It also helps that there is nothing to accidentally output in the other paths that are possible.
yeah. So it's actually 3 reactors that only use the blue Waldo, 1 that only uses the red, and 1 that uses both of them. So the blue Waldo is doing a lot of the work here. Even in this reactor, blue is hammering bond plus, so blue is actually doing something in all of the reactors.
Yeah, as we progress towards faster solutions of this primary metric, we should expect to see more cooperation.
Also interesting that the hydrochloric acid and these 2 outputs are all basically at the same rate. So to have any significant speed up here, you need to change this loop and this loop, which I'm not going to attempt on stream now.
Oh, Zaboka has quite the strong.
Yeah, also the hydrogen loop, because this is actually input limited here. I think.
Zaboka is helped by the quite strong acid loop with the fusion.
Yeah, this is a nice loop. Like, considering all the things that blue does, like just having 1 more loop in here is really nice. Okay, so actually I wanted to run this to completion now. So 17,320 cycles. It is not the fastest solution, but it is faster than all the essentially 1 reactor solutions we've seen so far, which is only the one by counterpoint. So like it's already almost twice as fast. And even lower symbols. And with that out of the way, we can move on to the 2nd place solution, which is held by Alliterative Allies, a team consisting of Tough Thought and Britboy, and the solution is called 1 unique reactor, 10 Waldos. That describes the situation pretty accurately. So what is happening here? There's only the bottom input, which red hits immediately. And then both Waldos immediately go onto sense commands. Red does not detect hydrogen because there's carbon there. Blue also already detects the carbon and moves up to hit input alpha, but there is no input alpha. So that just gets stuck and we can forget about that one. Meanwhile, red goes down here and grabs. Then the carbon sensor is no longer active, so it goes up there onto this little path, moving it onto the square of bonders, hitting the bonds correctly, and then outputting, because these bonders are already placed on the border between the 2 output zones.
Oh, surprisingly, this is not possible in the campaign puzzle. Because in the campaign puzzle, you only get 2 honors.
Do you? I don't remember, but thought you also had 4 there.
No, you get 2, because otherwise you would simply do this exact thing.
Okay, then it's 2 there. Did Zach know about the implications of bonder priority when setting these puzzles?
No, I'm sure Zach and his team made a random selection of puzzles for research and then distributed them among the plans. So this is why they seem so disconnected from the general theme of the plans.
So yeah, that is the first one. And then it's also important to note that all of these reactors are close by the inputs because on the storage tanks, because they just immediately start going onto these sense commands. Here, the bottom input is hydrogen. The top storage tank isn't even used at all. So it's just building hydrochloric acid out of the hydrogen.
I think in World 3 there's a puzzle that is supposed to be quite difficult, but dies to bonder priority cheese.
Yeah, so both Waldos start going onto paths with all of these hydrogen sensors. Red grabs the hydrogen and goes onto a little fusion loop right here with these flip-flops, while blue is going on a different loop over there. Okay, let's see what this fuses to. So this is actually a 3-count flip-flop followed by another 3-count flip-flop followed by a 2-count. So this is an 18-count. I think it is. Would make sense. Yeah, so 17 there and the 18th one goes over there, which I just barely missed. But anyway, so red dropped it over here and then blue immediately picked it up. So the hydrogen is now going over there and red continues and now grabs instead of dropping here and picks up the chlorine. Now there is no hydrogen on the sensor because this path didn't hit an input command, so it goes a different path now as well. Only hits the input command over here and it drops the chlorine on this drop. Then red starts its loop again. Meanwhile, blue dropped off the hydrogen on there and grabs the chlorine, bonds it to the hydrogen, and then drops that over there. And hits the output command to output the hydrochloric acid. So here we have the two Waldos cooperating. Red is just on a loop here, mostly flip-flop counting. And Tough Thought also points out that the loops are synchronized. That is pretty nice. There are no syncs on them. Red is 186 cycles. And blue is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 cycles usually, but then it hits 2 rotates. So it's 16 So yeah, blue is 14 for 11 loops and 16 for 2 loops, Tough Thought says. Okay, that is neat. And then here we have the hydrogen again. So just like there's a hydrogen input, but this time it starts off with a hydrogen molecule. So blue actually blindly grabs this out of the way, and then red continues going down rather than into this fusion loop. And blue hands it off to red again. Then blue sits on a silicon sense. That won't happen here, so we can disable that. Now it just grabs on the left side, and it goes through this kind of loop over there. Let's see what happens when there's a single hydrogen. That one gets grabbed on the grab drop and then picked up on the return path. Or not really return, it just goes around again. Bonds, drops, and grabs, so it handles the two cases separately by blindly grabbing. Yeah, that makes sense.
The four-bonder arrangement between the output zones is quite strong here because it leads to strong ethane handling, and it's quite easily reusable by other parts of the solution.
Also, for me, it's currently the time of day where I have a hornet flying against my window because it wants to get to the light. That is a bit annoying. It happens kind of every day here.
Are you in UTC plus 2? Or UTC plus 3?
Central European time, whatever that is, I think +2. Definitely not +3. Depending on summer, winter time, whatever, maybe also +1. I think it's +2 right now. So yeah, okay, that is this loop. And then we have the one down here with the phosphorus and silicon at the bottom and the hydrogen at the top. Blue is actually not sensing anything because the input is a bit further away and red is still waiting for that. And then when it happens, blue senses the silicon and red also senses the silicon over there. And then blue just goes onto the sink and does not do anything else. Okay. Now we've seen this before with the flip-flop and input and then just bonding to one of those two locations. It goes all the way around here. And it is actually just using this flip-flop and this flip-flop as a 4 count. And then dropping there, but grabbing again and then dropping up there to output the silane. So for that output, it is just counting to 4 for the hydrogens. Okay, and now there's phosphorus. And that is taking a different path. But I think I actually missed when that started. So the important thing to note about that one is that it gets triggered here already by the phosphorus sensor and then moves through this flip-flop, priming it so that the 4 count turns into a 3 count flip-flop. So after 3 hydrogens, it already moves here, and then there's nothing to grab there, so it stays in the lower output zone. So yeah, that is how this reactor works. Yeah, I agree with Big Mango Head that this is a smart way of handling phosphine and silane without having to have any sense commands near the sensor glyph. Just using one sense in the beginning to distinguish between the 2 cases, and then flip-flop counts the rest. And finally, for this reactor, there is fluorine, which gets detected by these 2 sense commands. Red goes up here on a back and forth between input, sync, and output commands. And blue does most of the things. So it starts by grabbing this, bonding up there. So fluorine gets bonded up there, and it gets placed again with the carbon over there. Red already inputs because this sink right here essentially acts as an input with sinks and inputs alternating along this thing. And then the second time it rotates like that and blindly grabs over there, bringing the stick over there and building the polymer out of it.
This is a generally useful pattern for entering a 2-arrow loop. Without coming from either of the ends. You can have that loop on the edge and enter it with a flip-flop, such as D1 on D1. So when you are in the loop, the flip-flop is never meaningful. It doesn't disrupt your loop.
Yeah, and because there are 2 sinks and it is going back and forth, there are essentially 4 sinks in one loop of this. So this also acts as a 4 counter to output at the appropriate time. Right now.
Big Man had also points out that you can have an arrow pointing left on D1. So in the event that this wasn't rank 1, you could still have it. But here symbols are the least important metric, so even though it probably wouldn't have made a difference, it's nothing to know. And also you should always care about all metrics.
Okay, yeah. And we also see that these 4 outputs are pretty balanced actually, with the hydrochloric acid being the slowest, but not by a lot. And that is still a pretty small loop here for red.
Yeah, I think it's just the fastest. Yeah, it's the fastest loop that syncs. Remember that not all loops that could have been possible here do sync. So not all loops lead to solutions.
Yeah, and
Not all loop counts lead to solutions. I mean,
you could have done something entirely different, like we've seen before, where one Waldo goes over a lot of things and the other one just has a really tight loop. But that probably doesn't fit in there for different reasons. Anyway, this one is 14,300 cycles, making it about 3,000 cycles faster than the previous one. Also,
congratulations for second place.
Congratulations to Saboka for third place and Alliterative Allies for second place. And now we have only the first place left, which is held by Big Mango Head, with both Waldos redo version 15. So, also the top solution uses 2 Waldos in each reactor. Nobody has managed to solve this with essentially 1 reactor and only 1 Waldo. Which is also pretty much what I expected. I expected these 2 kinds of solutions and left the metric in such a way that it wouldn't completely break if somebody managed to make essentially 1 Waldo, 1 reactor, but I didn't really expect that to work out.
I think Big Bang Head has a write-up on why it's probably unplayable at single Waldo, essentially 1 reactor.
Yeah, so Big Mango Head says that it's not impossible, but just really hard, and he got nowhere close to a solution with trying for a long time, and also came up with reasons why it's so hard. And instead, here is still a solution with 2 Waldos and a lot of symbols, but the fastest one of its kind.
And Big Bang Head has 168 symbols per reactor, which is the highest per reactor symbol count I have ever seen. I mean, just look at this.
So red starts by inputting at the bottom, and there is the sensor in the bottom zone, just like in the previous solution. And yeah, blue is already going over some sense commands, while red is grabbing there blindly. That is interesting. So there was a carbon there, so the sensor didn't trigger the sense command, and then red moves it out of the way, so there is now a hydrogen. But the carbon already triggered, so blue is stuck there, so we can get rid of the blue Waldo for this reactor. And red just carries the molecule across, bringing it
Here the bonders are not placed between the output zones.
But it's still a pretty neat bounce back here to grab drop, then do the bond thing, and grab this again, drop it down there. That doesn't really waste many cycles and also not much space.
I guess if you have that one tile lower, you don't really have to bounce back. You don't have to pick up anything up ever again.
But there are probably other reasons why these bonders are up there. But Big Mango Head points out that he doesn't really know why he placed those up there, and maybe it's also possible to have that lower. Yeah, but then considering that the red Waldo does an entire extra loop around without carrying an input, that is probably not where the most cycles are wasted here. Yeah, but that's...
the performance in the cycle performance in this case doesn't really matter because it's because the other instances of this reactor are probably slower. But it could help in the symbol space sense. So like less symbols to accomplish this task, less space needed, more freedom in the other cases.
So yeah, after this drop, if this was across the border, you would just need to hit bond minus, then 2 bond pluses, and then the output commands at some point. And there's even a bond plus here already on the path, which could be reused for that purpose. So yeah, you could save some symbols around here. Now for the second reactor, it actually uses the random input here. How does it use that? It inputs with some delay. So blue runs over its sense commands without any atom there to sense. And then the atom arrives. It is silicon. Didn't trigger here, so you can distinguish the two silicon cases just by timing rather than by moving 2 atoms to the bottom and not using them.
Yeah, I think it was Counterpoint that had an awkward slam situation where they couldn't tell the instances apart for quite a long time.
Yeah, and this is the easier way to tell them apart, just by timing the Waldos with the input rather than spending a lot of symbols on getting to the third input. And then red is sitting on a lot of sinks over there because it is counting to chlorine. Meanwhile, red is moving up here. It is still sensing the silicon and just goes into a fusion loop, which is really tight. just 6 cycles per input. So when there's chlorine there, red grabs that and hits another sink. Red inputs and blue immediately bonds before red can grab that. And that is the hydrochloric acid, which red just brings back to the output zone and then goes back into the loop.
I'm very surprised with how that's the correct timing for that.
So yeah, blue hits a sink right there, so it is in control of the timing. It's not that surprising, but it's still nice how that works out.
Like, is the only space possible for that sink?
I mean, you could put the sink in the corner and have a flip-flop going down, so one more delay before it reaches the bond plus.
No, it would have been too late.
Yeah, so if the timing was different, you could have the sink in a different place for a different timing. Yeah, anyway.
Alright, never mind.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, this is like the third hour already. I'm not quite in shape.
So this is definitely a very fast fusion loop here. And we have the two walls cooperating to determine when the fusion is done. Then down here, that was the wrong button. This one.
I guess one disadvantage of this naming scheme is that it's difficult to tell levels apart.
So yeah, hydrogen, there's a hydrogen on the sensor. Blue detects that.
And we have a non-trivial reactor topology.
So red's loop is dropping over here and then blindly grabbing there. So it grabs hydrogen molecules and leaves hydrogen atoms over there for blue to grab. And then it goes up here. And there are some flip-flops.
Well, I argue that the details here don't matter. What matters is that some hydrogen molecules go to the counter and some to the... some atoms go to the... Actually, where do they go? I think one of these is a waste pipe.
Yeah, after this output throughput thingy, it's a waste pipe, and this one is actually connected to the next reactor.
Why is that playable? How do you find 77 spaces?
Yeah, don't you see there's definitely 77 spaces of pipe around here?
I didn't think this would be playable. We should have said like 777.
But that would take too long to run for the stream. Yeah, maybe we should have more consciously thought if we want to allow for such a solution or not. I don't think we really thought about it.
I remember I mentioned it when you sent me the 10 input version.
Yeah, 10 outputs wasn't quite enough for like several reasons, and because there are a bunch of 7s already in this level, we then decided on 77 and never really counted how much space there is for a waste pipe. At least I didn't. But I'm fine with having some creative solutions like this. Like, it's not like I didn't want to see this. I just didn't really consider it that much, and you
well, this is allowed. This is definitely allowed.
I mean, now it's too late anyway to change anything. So yeah, up here, sometimes the hydrogen gets dropped into the output zone, and sometimes it gets dropped over here and grabbed again. Where blue then grabs it and it actually debonds outputs and drops outputs, so it passes individual hydrogen atoms. Yeah, because it turns some of these hydrogen molecules into individual atoms to pass them on. 77 waste pipe is enough. If you just blindly pass the single hydrogens on and output the double hydrogens, then you would actually need a lot more waste pipe. So I think it's something like 1/3 of the hydrogen molecules gets output here, and 2/3 gets split up into individual hydrogen, but I'm not quite sure what these flip-flops and sensors are doing in combination, so maybe Big Mango Head can explain what is going on in these 4 squares. There's also a flip-flop on D7. Okay. So half of the inputs go to the top right loop. And the other half gets ended off immediately. Yeah. Then also, this hydrogen sensor always active? Okay. So red's hydrogen sensors are apparently always active here. So then this is just a 3-count flip-flop. I wasn't sure if there was some timing where these flip-flops would not be active. Okay, so I think that's enough for this. It has a lot of waste pipe, and then it sends individual hydrogen atoms over here. So red inputs again, it inputs silicon here, this time immediately, not with a delay. So blue senses this and goes onto a path on the left rather than a path up there. Blue grabs this now and red goes up here. Red is now waiting on a sink, while blue is waiting on a hydrogen. This is probably wrong for some reason, but let's just put a pause there for now. So it uses a hydrogen sensor to count to 3 hydrogens down there. Now with the 3rd hydrogen detected, it goes down here, drops the molecule on the sensor, checks if it is silicon or phosphorus. And for the case of silicon, it goes back up and grabs it right there, inputs another input, and it detects the hydrogen again. And now there's the flip-flop, so it goes up and never gets to the sensor and just grabs it right here. Now it drops over at the bottom here, blindly outputs, but that doesn't actually work because there's a 4th hydrogen. So phosphine would have been output, but silane does not get output. That gets moved up and then output right there. And then it goes into this loop again. Okay, let's move on to the case where it's phosphorus. There it goes down here, detects the phosphorus, and immediately goes up there. So it resets the flip-flop and then grabs this right there. Also, red just sits on the sink indefinitely, so I can get rid of the red Waldo from this. I was not sure it wouldn't hit sink again, but blue does not hit any sinks on this path. Okay, so undo this. That is this reactor, and then there is one more reactor, actually the same, which inputs carbon, and blue detects that and immediately stops doing anything. And it goes up here and attaches the fluorine and starts building the polymer down like that. And then there's a blind grab drop and an output. So you could also totally save a symbol here by getting rid of this drop. So we have a horribly unoptimized first place solution. But that is all the reactors. Which one is the slowest? So 63, 62, 60, 63. All of these are pretty balanced. but these two are slightly slower. And I'm not actually sure. Yeah, I think it's hydrogen limited again, as Big Mango says. Yeah, this one is waiting on its hydrogen a lot. So could you speed this up? Not easily. It's pretty important that this ratio of hydrogen distribution is like this.
I mean, at this point, you might consider trying for an improvement in primaries. But I do know that Big Man has already tried that.
I just want to be absolutely sure that this is not needed anywhere. Okay, it is not. So you can save 5 symbols like that. And then it comes out to 11,159 cycles, saving another around 3,000 cycles compared to the second place. So congratulations on first place, Big Mango Head.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I'm also feeling the 2.5 hour stream right now. Don't even know what to say anymore.
Do we announce?
What do we have to announce? If you have some secret, you can write it in a private message. I don't really know what we have to announce. If it's not that secret, you can also just say it.
I mean, what were there any rounds that started yesterday that we have to announce?
No, there was nothing that started yesterday. The final round 8 started last week.
Oh, and I think we're close to the deadline on the all the elements one.
Yeah, that is next week. And that was announced like 4 weeks ago. So Big Mango.
Time flows surprisingly fast when you have an actual job.
Yeah, I agree with that. Big Mango had sent one more fun solution or something like that. Well, not really, but at least a partial solution. So that's
No, it cannot be.
It's not
fun
an
solution
official
because
fun solution. It's just a partial one Waldo solution. So this one uses 6 reactors actually. Well, 2 of them don't do anything. And there's the 2x2, so it puts the ethane on top of that.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like it's close to being an actual solution because almost every tile is consumed already, and you have one more task to do, or maybe 2 more tasks to do.
So yeah,
I'm not sure.
this task works. This task detects silicon there.
Yeah, we have the doorstopper silicon, and it's not clear why. Or maybe maybe the other task with the silicon is not implemented. But here we basically consume a lot of symbol space to count up to 17.
Okay, now it's at 15, 16, and eventually 17. Yeah, probably this hydrochloric acid thing taking up half the reactor is not ideal.
Yeah, so when silicon is a door stopper, you cannot use your sensor anymore. So this is a huge disadvantage for this strategy.
Then over here,
no, I think this one is not. This one is not the one that consumes symbol space.
yeah. So Big Mango Head also says really the biggest problem is that you need so much on the sensor, need to do so much on the sensor, like you want to use the sensor to distinguish between all the different loops you have, but you also need to use it in certain input handling, and it's a mess. Okay, so this one just sends the individual hydrogen to the top output and the hydrogen molecule to the bottom. And then the individual hydrogens get used here, and the hydrogen pair gets sent into yet another reactor, which has to compress the waste in some way. Which I presume... Yeah, I don't know how you would want to do that. Maybe you could reuse like the hydrochloric acid creation for that and just use a lot of hydrogen into some whatever that you then output into a waste pipe.
Maybe you do output hydrochloric acids.
The difference is just that for hydrochloric acid you get individual hydrogen as input, and here you get hydrogen molecules as input, so it's not quite that simple.
But would outputting hydrochloric acids suffice?
Probably.
So we have the 3.5 times.
Yeah, we need 7 times 77 outputs here, and we get twice that much waste, so that's 2 times 7 times 77. That's...
We have 539 hydrogens to output to the bottom.
Yeah, so we get 1078. And if we have hydrochloric acid, that divided by 18.
You basically have to. You have to output like 60, maybe 65 molecules worth of hydrochloric acid.
Yeah,
I think it's close.
It's pretty much exactly 60 outputs that you would need to store in a waste pipe if you could output hydrochloric acid. Maybe you could also fuse together like 17.
No, I think 6 is playable.
Yeah, just different ideas that you could also like reuse the logic somehow and use together 17 of these.
Oh, like if you see a second hydrogen, then you
just fuse it into there as well, and then you would only need half that much waste pipe. I'm not sure what the output would look like exactly.
yeah. So it's not clear whether it's playable at all. But if you do try to accomplish that, this would probably be the way to go.
Yeah, and then Big Mango Head also says, since some of the inputs have the same atoms, it's not even clean to distinguish between them. Idea for that waste reactors that you can hopefully do basically the same as the hydrochloric reactor. Yeah, we talked about that. And that is the dream. There's no dream for phosphine and silane. That's just not happening. So this reactor is the most problematic in this design. And then for the last reactor,
I guess I can guess that you're supposed to start choosing. You don't even want to use the random inputs at all in that reactor.
so if you don't use the random input, then you have to distinguish between this one that only gets hydrogens and this reactor, which only gets hydrogens, but this one starts off with hydrogen molecules, while this one gets atoms, so that is more doable. Potentially.
Alternatively, simply normalize to hydrogen molecules everywhere.
Yeah.
I have no idea whether that leads to a solution, but if there's any way to play this puzzle at this metric, this would surely be the way to play it. It saddens me quite a bit that I'm not quite at the skill level where I can take on this kind of challenge.
Yeah, and I'm busy with having to work and host a tournament and do things with that I can't spend that much time on actually solving all of these levels.
Well, I do have a job now.
Yeah. I just wanted to name my excuses again. Okay, I think with that, we don't have anything meaningful to say anymore.
Was this the last main line round?
That depends on if you count round 8 as a main line round or not.
Oh, I do. So it's not the last line.
Yeah, so next week we have the second special round, and then the week after we have the last normal round, which is not that normal because it's computational, and also the last challenge. And I'm wondering, we should maybe move that deadline to not have 2 streams on one day then. Who could have possibly seen this coming?
Not me. Oh, I see. You meant you didn't mean this.
Just who could have possibly seen that coming, that the 2 rounds ending on the same day would result in 2 live streams on the same day?
Yeah, I initially answered not me, but then then I realized that you did not mean this in the what's it called irony.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, I might be super out of shape by now.
Yeah, me too. So maybe I should just ask in chat if anyone strongly opposes moving the challenge deadline like 1 day earlier to the Friday or something. And if somebody really needs that 1 extra day, they can complain to me in a private message or something. And then we have to come up with a different idea.
I may not be available on Friday because I would be sleeping at the time. But I don't know.
I mean, we could also maybe move something to the Sunday.
Well, perhaps. Okay, I'm not particularly against. I'm not against any particular time for the stream. Just that maybe it may be difficult for me to find the time if it's on short notice.
Yeah, okay. I'll write something into the chat after the stream and then we'll see. Yeah, so that's it for the stream. I'm going to end the recording now. Bye.